everybody who's got an interview with Stella afterwards, we're going to take Stella downstairs in a separate room. It's 2 floors down. It's the room 1910. Okay, so I will be taking Stella down and we'll do the interviews with her there, and all the other speakers will be doing interviews here, and Kate will be in charge here and I will be downstairs. Okay, the room is called 1910. It's where the restaurant is, where we did Joseph Stiglitz, for those who were here for Joseph. Okay, perfect. Stella, you're there. Kristinn, you're over there. And Rebecca, you're and Jen.
So this is?
Hello, hello, hello. Apologies for the few minutes delay in starting. I'm delighted to welcome you to the millionth FPA press briefing on the Assange case. I'm just We thought it was the last one a couple of months ago. Let's see if this is the last chance. We're here, of course, with Stella Assange, with Kristinn Hrafnsson, who is Wikileaks editor-in-chief, Rebecca Vincent, who is RSF's Director of International Campaigns, and we have Jennifer Robinson, barrister, who is on video link, and it works, and we can hear her perfectly so far. As usual, we're going to start with a few remarks from all the speakers, and then we're going to get immediately into questions. So it's immediately over to you, Stella, if you want to remind us of how important this moment is.
Thank you everyone for coming. On Monday we have the decisive hearing. Julian is just one decision away from being extradited. If the judges find against him on Monday, then there will be no further avenues for appeal in the UK, and the UK will move to extradite him. The timing is uncertain, but we know that in other cases, other national security cases of extraditions to the United States, the person has been extradited within 24 hours of a decision. The United States has been given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to change its case in order to get Julian extradited. Initially it lost in January 2021. That was the initial magistrate's decision to deny extradition based on the mental health and physical conditions that Julian will be placed under if extradited. And then once that decision came through, the United States was allowed to change its case by issuing so-called assurances, which the High Court then accepted. And an extradition order was issued, and then Priti Patel, who at the time was the Home Secretary, in June 2022, I believe, issued her approval of the extradition as well. Julian then requested permission to appeal to the High Court, which was initially denied, and then when he sought a separate panel of High Court judges to review that decision, which is the current panel that Julian is before, in February they gave a provisional permission to appeal to the High Court, and that provisional permission is subject to US so-called assurances. Now think about how bizarre this case is, where the United States has not only had 2 rounds of assurances, but also 3 sets of indictments. It seems like they are given endless chances to change their case in order to get Julian extradited to face 175 years for publishing evidence of US war crimes. And so here we are, 5 days from the decision, which will most likely come on Monday. I believe it's quite narrow, it's very narrow arguments for consideration. The judges already have the arguments on paper. There will be a hearing in the morning and maybe into the afternoon, and I can't say for certain, but I think it would be pretty likely that we expect a decision the same day. And it can go 3 different ways. Now, as I said earlier, Julian could, the judges could find against Julian, and he could then, he would then be placed in the process of extradition, and of course, as I've already said earlier, we would seek to get the European Court of Human Rights to stop that extradition through an order and put in the full application. We have a bit more time to do the full application to the European Court of Human Rights. These are two separate procedures. Or Julian could win this round, and winning this round would mean that the court would say, well, actually, we don't find the US diplomatic note to be responsive to what we asked them to do. And I think Jen will probably go into the detail of that, Jennifer Robinson. And so if they rule in Julian's favor, that means that a full hearing will take place on these narrow issues before the High Court at a later date, and Julian will most likely just remain in Belmarsh prison for months and months to come until there is a full High Court appeal. There is a third possibility, which is that there is discretion by the High Court judges at this stage, and there is very narrow arguments before the court, and they could decide to roll up the hearing, as in they could decide to have a full High Court appeal hearing. So I believe, and I have the sense, that anything could happen at this stage. Julian could be extradited, or he could be freed, and I think it's important to have that in mind, that this has gone on for over 5 years. Julian has been in the UK's most notorious prison for this entire time, and 7 years preceding that in the Ecuadorian embassy, and 1.5 years under house arrest. In fact, every day since the 7th of December 2010, he has been in one form of detention or another. The 7th of December 2010 is 7 days after WikiLeaks started publishing the diplomatic cables. I think I'll...
Thank you. Yeah, Kristinn. Or, yeah, and yeah.
Well, thank you, FPA, for hosting this meeting, and thank you all for coming here. It is very valuable for us to have your attention to the case. I want to emphasize that you not only look at the process in the courts here in the UK. It is abundantly clear, of course, that the process in the courts in the United Kingdom are corrupt. The case is rigged against Julian. As Stella mentions, it is evident from all the opportunities that the United States has had been offered to amend their case when it was about to collapse. The judges here come out and they offer the opportunity to amend. I know these are harsh words, and words that we usually have for courts in non-European countries, non-Western countries. But I've come to the opinion that that is absolutely the case. This is institutional corruption on a judicial level. Julian Assange is a political prisoner. It's abundantly clear. And I hope that you can look into the case, the details of the case, where the evidence is basically screaming at you. Look, for example, at paragraph 210 in the last ruling by the courts here, when they denied to Julian, almost on all points, the opportunity to appeal. Even all of those arguments were so strong that under normal circumstances he should be allowed to appeal. Let me dwell on that specific one. Paragraph 210. This is where Julian argues, where Julian's lawyers argues on his behalf, that it should be abundantly clear that you cannot extradite an individual to a country whose secret service has drawn up plots to kidnap or assassinate the individual. And this has been made known in stories that have not been repudiated, which have been confirmed. And I'm referring to the CIA plot to kidnap or assassinate Julian in 2017, at the time when Mike Pompeo was director of the agency. Now, what did the court say in this paragraph? This is like something out of Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm pretty close. You will find out if you look it up. The argument is this. Even if it is credible that the CIA did plot to kidnap or kill Julian Assange in the United States, if he is legally extradited through a lawful process, the need to kidnap and assassinate him falls away. Thereby, it is not an argument for an appeal. Can you believe this? This is something you read out of papers in the Royal Court of Justice. It's unbelievable. So, the judicial process is rigged. We have been focusing on the political aspect of the case and a political solution. And it has been bearing fruit. More and more political leaders are coming to the side of Julian. They see the absurdity in this case and how serious implication this would have for press freedom worldwide. All progressive leaders of Latin America have come out in support of Julian Assange. Of course, his prime minister in his home country, Anthony Albanese, has been in full support of the demand that this case is closed. More and more politicians on our end of the world have also come out and said, this is enough. Even Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, said about 3 weeks ago that Julian Assange should not be extradited. All major organizations that care about freedom of speech and freedom of expression see the danger in this and are supporting Julian. The European Council has mandated their Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression to write a report on the case, and the representative actually is in the room. Is Ivarsdottir, who is the Special Rapporteur from PASE, and she met Julian Assange in Belmarsh prison yesterday. But it's important that the focus is on the court to expose how crooked this case is. So I welcome you here, and I hope you will put the focus on the judges on Monday, because they need scrutiny, definite scrutiny, and it is a knowledge of the case that creates the outrage that possibly will lead to the right outcome, that he walks free.
Thank you, Kristinn. Rebecca, and then come to you, Jen.
Thanks. Indeed, it's really a shame we've had to have so many of these briefings, actually. This has been a very long and convoluted process. My organization, Reporters Without Borders, has been monitoring proceedings since 2020 in various courts. Monday's hearing is, of course, crucial. My organization defends Julian Assange because of the implications it has for press freedom. So there's still often a lot of noise around the case that tries to make it about other things, but for us it very much is about press freedom, it's about journalism. The publication of the cables and the other documents was in the public interest. It informed public interest reporting around the world. We still see stories being published on the basis of these leaks. So what is being considered here is a normal journalistic practice, and that is what is at stake, because if Julian Assange is brought to the US, if he is prosecuted under the Espionage Act, the precedent is then set for the same sort of case to be applied to any publisher, any journalist, any source. Any media organization that works with leaked classified information could find themselves in the same situation. At RSF, our hope for justice here in the UK is not completely diminished. At each stage, that space for hope shrinks, but a small glimmer of hope is still there, and that is what we're hoping for on Monday. It is not too late for there to be some form of justice at this late stage to prevent Julian Assange's extradition through legal means. If we see the opposite on Monday, if we see a definitive decision, that means that the UK proceedings will be closed. It is crucial that his rights under the European Convention are respected, that the UK respects its obligations under the European Convention, and that he's able to pursue an appeal in Strasbourg and to not be extradited during that time. The entire world will be watching the behavior of this government if that is the scenario that we find ourselves in. But these three remaining grounds deserve full consideration. They deserve a proper hearing. The substance is incredibly important. So if this is just closed politely because of these political promises between states, that is a real shame. And that will enable the most dangerous press freedom prosecution of our time. So I want to be very clear about that. And I know Jen will add some more on the legal case, but I'll hand over to her now and happy to discuss that further.
Yes, Jen, if you want to shed some light on what the avenues are now with this last hearing.
Sure. Well, first, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm joining you from Australia. And just to say a few words about Australia, I'm a fellow Australian citizen. Julian is an Australian citizen, and as Kristinn mentioned, the Australian government has put their support behind Julian Assange. So from here in Australia, I can say that we are working closely with our Prime Minister and our Attorney General and the Australian government to try to seek a resolution of this case, and we continue to demand that Julian be released, the case be brought to an end, and he be brought home to Australia. It's important for people to remember it's not just the Australian government's support, there is bipartisan political support for Julian Assange here in Australia, and just recently we had a parliamentary resolution go through our parliament with 2/3 of the parliament's support calling on the UK and the US to drop this case and to allow Julian to return home to Australia. So that's important political context in which we understand this next very important stage of the case. And as Stella mentioned, we keep saying it's the final briefing, but really Julian could be extradited next week. And so this case is of huge legal significance, not just for Julian, but for journalists everywhere. He faces 175 years in prison for receiving, possessing and publishing national security information, for publishing truthful information about the United States. And what the US is doing with this case is setting a precedent where they're exercising jurisdiction over any journalist or editor anywhere in the world who receives, possesses and publishes US information in circumstances where they will argue in the US courts, and they intend to argue in Julian's case that he will not benefit from First Amendment protections, and that none of you in this room, if you are sought for prosecution in the United States, they will seek to exercise their jurisdiction over you, have you criminally prosecuted without any free speech protections. So it is incredibly important, and that is the crux of the issue that will be before the court on Monday. As Stella explained, this case has a long and flawed history. It's a flawed indictment, it's a flawed extradition request that the US has been given ample opportunity to continually remedy, and we say it is fundamentally flawed. It should never have been brought in the first place and should be rejected, and Julian should not be extradited. The key issues that we face here though now, as you know, in February there was an appeal hearing where Julian sought permission to appeal both against the Secretary of State's decision to extradite him and against the earlier district court's decision to extradite him. Of course, we won on the basis that his extradition would be oppressive on the grounds of medical evidence. The US offered an assurance, which was not tested by the court and was waved through without us being able to make detailed submissions about it. And therefore, we're in the position of having to appeal against the outstanding grounds that we were initially not successful on before the Magistrates' Court. As a result of that hearing last month, we had the decision from the court at the end of March saying that they would grant us provisional permission to appeal on 3 separate grounds. Those being related to the First Amendment, that Julian as an Australian citizen, it is clear that the US prosecutor is going to argue that he will not benefit at all from First Amendment protections because he's a foreign national, and that on that basis he would also be discriminated against on the basis that he is not a US citizen on the basis of his nationality, he's Australian. And finally, we will grant a provisional leave to appeal on the grounds that once extradited to the United States, Julian could be subjected to the death penalty. Now, the court granted provisional leave to appeal, but gave the US the opportunity, again, to provide assurances in response to these concerns that have been raised. The US provided those assurances, and that's now triggered the process where we've had an opportunity to make submissions in response to those assurances. The US has responded, and on Monday we'll have a hearing where the court will hear those arguments, having received the written submissions from both of our legal teams. Our concern is serious about the US, the nature of the US assurances, and they are public, so you can have a read of them. What the US is saying is that Julian can seek to rely in court on the First Amendment, but it will be a matter for the courts to decide. So what you need to understand about that is a non-assurance. It doesn't provide any assurance whatsoever about what will happen once if he's extradited to the United States, what will happen and whether he'll be permitted to rely on the First Amendment. There's a very long series of cases in the United States, a line of case law, which says in clear terms that foreign nationals for acts committed outside of the United States will not benefit from First Amendment protections. So this assurance does not bind the US court, it doesn't bind a prosecutor from arguing that he will not benefit from First Amendment, and so it's no assurance at all that once in the United States he will in fact be able to rely upon First Amendment protections. And this should be concerning for all of you. This is no assurance whatsoever, and we say the court can't rely on it. In terms of the precedent this is setting, you all ought to be alert to this concern. There is very clear case law in the United States that foreign nationals will not benefit from First Amendment protections, and in these circumstances we say that the court cannot consider this to be a satisfactory assurance. But it remains to be seen what the court will do with this. If we're unsuccessful, the court will order his extradition, and this is our final avenue of appeal. We are, of course, prepared to make an application to the European Court of Human Rights, but that is an exceptional measure. It's not a guaranteed right of appeal. We'll have to wait to see what the European Court of Human Rights does. And we could be in legal process for a number of years if we end up in that. If we are successful and the court agrees with us that this is an unsatisfactory assurance, then we will be given permission to appeal and we could have a hearing at a later date. But it is, as Stella has said, has been incredibly taxing on Stella herself, on Julian himself, the ramifications of these decisions and the risk of his extradition. The roller coaster that this process has been has placed a huge toll on his mental and physical health and a huge toll on their family. And we say that this case ought to be brought to an end. And this could be resolved at any time by the United States making the decision, which we say is the right one, to drop this case and to drop an indictment that has been universally condemned by free speech groups and the mainstream media. So I'll leave it there with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stella, I'll kick off, but I'm completely aware that it's a room full of colleagues and I don't want to take up too much time at all. You called the assurances weasel words, and Jen has been into a bit of detail about why, but how likely is it that the courts will accept them, do you think? And are you actually really relying on Joe Biden's decision in the end to drop the case?
The court should not accept this diplomatic note because it doesn't respond to the assurances that they were seeking. I can't anticipate what the court will do, and on any of the arguments that Julian presented in the earlier rounds, he should have been successful. And as Kristinn was saying, for example, the murder plot being an obvious one, and even that was rejected, and it was rejected in an absurd piece of argumentation that I think I would have been embarrassed to put that in black and white. So I don't expect a rational outcome from the courts, I'm afraid to say. Do I hold some hope that they will do the right thing and Julian will win in the end? Of course, I have to have some faith that can happen, and I hope it will. But I've observed what has happened over the past 5 years, and I think Kristinn's analysis is sound.
Thank you. I'll just squeeze another one really quickly in. Do you think a change of government in this country might change the outcome for Julian?
It's all politics in this case. It is all politics. That being said, the CPS has had has not acted in good faith when it comes to Julian since his arrest in 2010. There is correspondence from the CPS evidencing that they were colluding at the time to keep him in legal limbo and to keep him in some form of detention and keeping from being able to defend himself and be free. And unfortunately, there's a political dimension to that, which I don't want to spell out, but it's all politics.
So just to add on that, of course, it's not only this country that has an election coming up. We don't know how the US elections will play into this case either. I agree with Stella and Kristinn's assessment that this is a political case. We've talked about this quite a lot. We don't know what will happen in the event, for example, of a return of Trump, whose DOJ brought this case in the first place. President Biden has the chance still to be the president who put an end to this, who acted in the interest of press freedom and journalism, rather than enabling this very dangerous prosecution that will tarnish the reputation forever of the country of the First Amendment. So he has this chance now. Regardless of what happens in the UK courts, and again, we're still hoping that there could be a legal means to prevent extradition, but it is a political case. We call again on the Biden administration to bring it to a close now, to allow for Assange's release with no further time in prison anywhere.
Thank you. Let's start with the question. I have Carlos and you on this side, and then I'll come to this side.
Carlos from Spain. I want to ask you about the pressure from Anthony Albanese and the Australian government has been crucial in these final stages. And just one more question: in the best case scenario, are you planning to move to Australia with your whole family? You are lucky on Monday.
Yes. The Australian government's decision to back Julian's freedom has been crucial. It has, I think, changed the direction that this can go in a decisive way, potentially. Up until now, up until the Albanese government, the Australian administrations were complicit, I'd say, in abandoning Julian, in facilitating the US persecution. But now it's not just the Albanese government, but also the leader of the opposition and the rest of the opposition in a resolution actually on Valentine's Day this year. It was 2/3 of Parliament who were calling for Julian to be freed. The backing of Julian in Australia is across the board, and that is incredibly important, because without the backing of your government, if you're a political prisoner, you are you have no chance of release. Would we move to Australia? I will follow Julian wherever he goes and wherever he is safe. And Julian misses Australia, and we're very keen to travel to Australia with the kids, and for him to, show his home country to our children, and to go to all his. Well, I've only been once, and that was just for a few days last year, I think. So I'll follow him wherever he goes, and especially safety is the most important thing.
Thank you. Yep. We're getting a microphone for you. Just turn it on. Yep.
Thank you. Hrafnsson from CNN. Has there been any movement since President Biden made his remarks about considering dropping the charges against Julian? And also, we know the Australian Foreign Minister has met with his counterpart, the US Foreign Minister as well. Do you have any information on what could be going behind the scenes, maybe?
I think I'll pass this question to Jen, but I would say that President Biden's remark, which was kind of off the cuff, reflects what we know and what we've known for a long time, that this case is very controversial within the US administration. It is considered an enormous problem and a headache. It was brought in under the Trump administration, and the constitutional implications are clear. There's a recent letter from 40 professors of law of U.S. universities writing to the Biden administration saying this case is an existential threat to the First Amendment. So there's widespread understanding that this case is very bad. I don't know if Jen wants to add anything.
Jen?
Well, all I can say is that the Prime Minister has himself said publicly that he's raising it at the very highest levels and has repeatedly done so in the United States. We know that our Attorney General has met with the US Attorney General and that the Foreign Minister continues to raise it as well. So at all of the highest levels, the Australian government has been raising the matter. We hope that it will continue to make a difference in the case and that the US will accede to Australia's request that the case be closed and Julian be brought home to Australia. So we continue to work towards that outcome. And we are grateful for the principled support of the Australian government, which was really a principled decision by our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, to whom we're very grateful.
Thank you. Let's take a couple. I've got Kristinn and Susanna. And I see you, Julia.
Thank you. Kristinn from German Radio. Maybe I just didn't get you right, Stella, in your statement. Did you say that there might be the chance that Julian could get freed on Monday, which would be, in this case, the scenario? Could you explain it to us? And as well, could you explain the freed scenario as well for, just in case there might be a political solution in the negotiations between the US and Australia and maybe the UK?
The third scenario I think you were referring to, it's a possibility because there is broad discretion at this level. These are High Court judges. We're talking about provisional permission to appeal to the High Court. They have a very narrow set of issues before them. They have the arguments before them. And I'm flagging that is within their power to do a what's called a rolled up hearing, where you consider both the permission and the full appeal. And given the scope of the issues before the court, I obviously don't have any inside knowledge of what they intend to do, but that is a possibility of what they could do, because they sometimes do that.
They could say, we set him free.
They could set him free, yeah. I mean, if the U.S. extradition request is rejected, then the courts can say, decide to release him. This is anyway, that's
Thank you. Susanna?
Yes.
Could you...
yes, sorry. Yes, Susanna Ebner, writing for German newspapers. So I was wondering, Stella, how is Julian doing these days? I mean, will he be there in court on Monday? And also, have you been able to visit him recently?
Yes, in fact, I came from visiting him now, which is why we are doing this briefing now, because I couldn't do the morning. I came straight from Belmarsh, and I was there with Fidel Narvaez, who's a friend of Julian's and was the consul of Ecuador for many years. He's under enormous pressure, as you can imagine. He has you know, the 20th is fast approaching. He's having trouble sleeping. He's, you know, having calls with his lawyers and visits with his lawyers. And yesterday there was a visit by the rapporteur from the Council of Europe. So he's under a lot of pressure, but he's also very busy, and I think he's constantly encouraged by signs that there is a political movement and a lot of people working, you know, publicly and privately, I think, to free him. I think he is hoping to be there. I mean, yes, I don't know what can happen between now and then, but yes, he's hoping to be there.
Thank you. I think I have Julia behind, yeah, there.
Thank you so much. Hi, it's Julia from the German news agency DPA. One question to you, Stella. I was wondering how you're holding up at the moment, and if you could maybe tell us something about your position on how the German Foreign Secretary Annalena Baerbock is handling the case.
Well, it's a very busy time for us as a family. Tomorrow our eldest turns 7, so we're juggling giving him a decent celebration as well as everything else. There's a lot going on, but that's a good thing. And obviously there's a lot of interest, which is why you're all here. And that's what we're focusing on, you know, for Julian's freedom is dependent on precisely this. In terms of the German government, as Kristinn mentioned, the German Chancellor has said that Julian should not be extradited. There has been some other comments, I think, I don't know if it was Baerbock, I think it was a foreign ministry official who said that Germany doesn't consider the accusation, what Julian is accused of, it wouldn't be a crime in Germany, and that their understanding of press freedom is different to what the United States is alleging here, and that's very diplomatic language for saying, you know what. But the foreign minister, I find it very curious that she hasn't said anything, given that when she was campaigning to form a government, to be part of the government, she was saying that Julian should be released and this case is an outrage and so on. But since she has become foreign minister, she has refrained from doing so, and I think it's quite unusual, given that the Chancellor himself has said it. So I don't know what's stopping her.
Thank you. Back to this side, you in the front row, and I'm sorry if I'm not seeing hands further back. This lady here.
Hi Stella, Amy Hunter from Australia. I just wanted to ask you about David McBride, the war crimes, Afghanistan war crimes whistleblower. Yesterday we got the decision that he's been sentenced to jail for 6 years. A lot of people are upset about this, so I just wondered if you got any messages for him, and is this a worrying event before next week? Yeah.
Well, it's absolutely vicious decision by the Australian courts to sentence David McBride, who is an Australian Army lawyer turned whistleblower, who provided documents to a journalist at the ABC that evidenced impunity over war crimes committed by the Australian Defence Forces in Afghanistan. And for that, for revealing these war crimes, the court has sentenced him to 5 years and 8 months, and the earliest possible parole is after, I think, 2 years and almost 3 years. So he's in prison now, and this is an extremely devastating development in Australia. It mirrors the way the United States is treating journalistic sources, and I think it's a very, very worrying trend that I think there's something there with this kind of Five Eyes lockstep. My message to David is that he's incredibly courageous and brave, and to be strong, and for his family to be strong, and that they'll get through it.
Thank you. I can see a hand over there. Celia.
Hi, Celia Massa from Spanish National Newspaper, Hrafnsson. Stella, I know that is a very sensitive issue, so I try to make the questions with all my respect. When you showed Julian Assange this morning, how is his mental health? I don't know if he's isolated in a cell all over this time, and you fear that if the results is no what you expect, he could, commit the suicide. And the second one is the whole legal process is so long. So how do you pay all this legal cost? Thank
you. I think it's a matter of public record that Julian's mental health is of extreme concern, and that his survival is at stake. And I think it's important to understand that he's under huge pressure, and he has enormous forces bearing down on him, and he is resisting those day to day. So he's surviving, and he's fighting to survive, and that's a daily battle. And of course, you have ample discussions about his mental health have been presented in court, and I won't go into that. But all the psychiatric evidence, both from the defense and the United States, concluded that there is a very serious risk of suicide. And in terms of the legal fees, Julian relies on donations. It is all donations, and Julian has enormous support, for which we are also grateful, because we have had a lot of a big legal team, the best that there is on offer, and many have spent a period working on pro bono, and so we're dependent on the goodwill and support of people around the world who has been donating to his legal fund, and those legal funds are they're public. The UK extradition fund is on crowd justice. There's also the Valholland Foundation in Germany that collects donations. In Australia, there's an Australian campaign and so on.
Thank you. Sorry, Kate, but it's over here. Benedict, please.
Benedict Pavio, France 24. Two things quickly, please. Would you kindly clarify, because I'm certainly not clear in my mind, how the day you believe is going to unfold, what time it starts? Is there an initial ruling on the assurances given, not given by the US? Then whether defence, prosecution, whatever that unfolds. You referred also to the afternoon Stella, so I was just wondering, just for all us to plan, but you did, I think, say that also you expected a decision on Monday, which is of course relevant for all. And then just on the mental health, well, it's not just, it's on the mental health. I wondered if any allowances were now, or at some point being made, and support given of any kind by the British prison authorities.
Well, Jen, I don't know if you want to go into how it unfolds. It is my personal expectation that there will be a decision on Monday. I have discussed it with some of the lawyers who share my view. There are some that say, well, maybe not. It's not a certainty. But the day will start. I think we will get there at around 9. I'll get there around 9:15. There's usually a queue outside. The actual session will start probably 10 or 10:30. I'm not sure. And then I think it was initially slotted for 2 hours, but we're expecting 3 of arguments. Jen, maybe you have more information.
Jen.
Unfortunately, I don't, but the court could do, as Stella explained, the court could do a number of things. We don't know what they'll do. They could reserve their decision like they did at the last hearing, or they could make the decision on the day. And the decision could be, as Stella explained, we're not satisfied with these assurances, so we'll grant you permission to appeal, and there'll be a listing, another hearing set down for that listing at some time in the future, which we won't know. Or they could decide on the day to make a decision on permission on the appeal itself. We're just not in a position to be able to know, and we have to be prepared for all of those outcomes. So unfortunately, so do you.
Mental health?
Any support on the mental health side from the prison authorities?
Stella?
But Julian, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Any support from the prison authorities on his mental health? Has that been taken into account? Has he been offered any support?
Julian continues to receive significant mental health and physical health support in prison. It's not clear whether he will be well enough to attend the hearing. And so we remain very, very concerned about him, as do the authorities, because of the nature of the medical evidence that we've all heard before the court.
Thank you. Any further question that I'm not seeing, please wave at me.
May I add maybe one thing, just
Yes,
because we are getting to the end of this,
Yeah.
this briefing here. This should not be a long process. It's a very simple questions that were asked of the US government. They have asked the question. It's all in writing. And just to sort of pinpoint what it was, the question was, can Julian rely on First Amendment protection? It should be an easy yes or no question. The answer was, he can seek to rely on First Amendment protection. That is a no. So the only rational decision on Monday would be for the judges to come out and say, this is not good enough. Anything else is a judicial scandal. I hope you keep that in mind for Monday.
Thank you. Rebecca, do you want to add anything before we wrap up?
Well, just because of the practical question about Monday, maybe just a word about access, because this has been a never-ending battle as well at each stage. So I can confirm that RSF has been given 2 seats for our observers to attend court. This is a relatively new development. We've been able to get seats formally the past 2 or 3 hearings only. It's been quite a fight. I haven't yet heard from other NGOs who are seeking access as well, whether they have. For journalists, there are many that are quite upset in other countries because the court has decided, as with the last hearing, that remote access will not be granted to those who are physically located outside of England and Wales. And I know there's a lot of concern about that because, of course, this is of international public interest. So your role here in London is even so much more important to be able to report on these proceedings for the rest of the world, because those who are not physically here will be reliant on you to inform them.
Excuse me, can you correct on this? I was late to a client to have the remote access. I click now and they ask like £300 for fees. Is this legal? Is it normal procedure?
So I don't know if Jen maybe knows on the legalities of that. I heard anecdotal evidence of a couple of journalists getting that from some parts of the court before, but that does not seem to be the normal procedure. So there is a contact I can share with you for the press officer who's responsible for accreditation if you haven't tried him. I don't know if any of you have also been asked to pay that, but it doesn't seem normal. Okay. Some journalists are being asked apparently to pay. So Jen, I think there's some legal discussion around these issues. Maybe we can take that up separately.
I think it's worth all the journalists in the room who are having issues with access to not just contact the court to confirm what access you've been given, but also if you have an issue, to contact your union, and it may be worth trying to challenge whatever restrictions you're facing. So certainly contact your union and they may well be able to provide you with further assistance, but the restrictions on access are very concerning. And it's certainly, there's been a step back from the openness approach that has been taken in this case until the most recent hearing.
Yeah. Thank you. And just to close, Sunna Aversdottir, the rapporteur of PACE, that Stella was mentioning at the beginning of this press conference, who visited Julian in jail yesterday. She's here in the room if anybody wants to speak to her. And she's reporting on human rights violations. So thank you very much. This closes this briefing, and I will take Stella downstairs. There's a list of interviews, and Kristinn, Rebecca, and up to a point, Jen. I think if you can stay just a little bit longer, we'll stay in this room. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Like a and it's sort of super relevant. Yeah. Okay. I'm leaving Jen on. I don't know how long.